This is KSL Sunday Edition with Boyd Matheson.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday Edition. I am Boyd Matheson. I usually begin our program each Sunday saying that we attempt to divide the rage from the reason, elevate the conversation, connect the dots, and make the news make sense. Well, today we're coming to you live, less than 18 hours following an attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump at an outdoor political rally in Pennsylvania. That took the life of an innocent rally attendee. It also injured the former president, Mr. Trump, and two others are critically wounded, along with the life of the shooter. There's much rage, there's very little reason, and much to unpack in order to connect the dots on where we are as a nation and where we will actually go from here. Now, we had planned today to share with you my conversation with Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall on how we are reimagining downtown, hosting the Olympics, dealing with homelessness and some of the big issues facing Utah, and what Utah is doing as not only a crossroads to the west, but a crossroads to the world. So you can see my full interview with Mayor Mendenhall in its entirety by going to KSLTV.com. So let's begin by walking through the events of what we know following the tragic and horrific scene that unfolded yesterday. I think as many watched, the president and his supporters were in very high spirits as the rally began, rolling in and preparing for the convention that will take place in Milwaukee beginning tomorrow. For the Republicans, Mr. Trump, of course, former president and presumptive nominee, was at the podium for only a few moments when shots rang out. The president went to his ear and then went to the ground. Secret Service immediately responded, covered the president very heroically. I think it's important to note that those Secret Service members say, you elect and we protect. And clearly that was on display yesterday as the Secret Service rushed in, covered the former president until things were clear and safe. You could see one agent running up, declaring very quickly that the shooter was down, had been neutralized, and that they were now clear and safe to move the president into the vehicle and get his wound attended to. Obviously, there was a lot of chaos in the crowd as this unfolded. And I think one of the interesting things, of course, with former President Trump was his reaction to that. When he first stood, he was clearly a bit ashen and a bit dazed, but he quickly gathered himself and then immediately responded to the crowd, raising his fist, mouthing those words, fight, fight, fight. That really drew a response from the crowd. And then, of course, he was taken away by Secret Service into the secure vehicle and taken away. In reaction to all of that, of course, President Biden was not in the White House, was not in Washington, D.C., was in Delaware attending Mass when he was informed of what had taken place. President Biden addressed the nation not long after as the details started to come in. President Biden was very clear that there is no place for this kind of action. No kind of political violence is ever justified in this country. And that's an important one for all of us to recognize and remember. President Biden also noted yesterday that he was pulling back his campaign, that he was suspending all of his advertising, all of his outreach, and his outbound communication was to be suspended until further notice, really signaling not only to Democrats and supporters across the country, but to the whole nation, that at times like this, it is time to stop all political speech and get back to what is it that unites us as a nation and what is it that will actually enable us to move the country forward. Also important to note that later on, very late last evening, President Biden and Mr. Trump spoke by telephone. I think that's also a significant moment. These two have been bitter political rivals throughout their campaigns against one another, really stemming all the way back to 2016 when then candidate Joe Biden was not given the nomination for the Democrats. Hillary Clinton, of course, won that. And then in 2020, their very fierce battle. And that has been heating up and continuing as those two have gone back and forth. So the fact that those two were on the phone together last night, I think is a significant moment. Now, I think it's also important for all of us to recognize as this continues to unfold, the identity of the shooter has been named. We will not do that here. And as the facts start to come out, we need to remember an important lesson for all of us, regardless of where you fall politically and what you care about most. We all need to remember that instant certainty is the enemy of truth, and it undermines trust. things that are critical for us in this country right now. And so as things come out, especially on social media, we encourage you to step back, to pause, to not react with more anger, with more contempt, with more fear and frustration. But just remember, just because you can say something does not mean that you should say something. And in the media, members of political parties, some have been very swift to offer reaction that hasn't done anything to turn the temperature down, but has only amped it up. So restraint always works. That's another important principle for us as we're in a very heated political cycle in a divided nation. And we have to get back to this element of trust, because if we lose that element of trust in this nation, we lose it all. We have stress tested this nation in all kinds of situations: world war, economic collapse, pandemics. We've never stress tested this nation in the absence of trust. And whether that's trust in our leaders, trust in the institutions, or trust in one another as fellow citizens. And that's the most important thing for us to really keep our eye on as all of this continues to unfold. Facts will emerge, new information will come, and we should wait for that. We should avoid the instant certainty, which always undermines trust, and it is the enemy of truth. And what we need more is truth in this country. I think it's also important for us to recognize that in the midst of a heated political campaign, there's much more that we can get to. There are crucial conversations that we need to have in this nation about a whole host of issues. We're going to dive into a few of those when we come back. We're also going to stay with this conversation, and we'll talk about the events from yesterday. But more importantly, we're going to explore the culture of contempt that has been crushing the nation. And it's actually my greatest fear, is that contempt is the cancer we have to cure. But that's going to be up to you and up to me, and how we process what has happened and how we chart the course forward to a more united nation. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sunday Edition. We're continuing our live coverage following the shooting and attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump yesterday in Pennsylvania. Of course, tomorrow everything will shift to Milwaukee as the Republicans begin their convention in Milwaukee. There'll be much fervor there, and probably some angry folks with a lot to say. So managing how this all plays out is going to be a very interesting test for the former president to see if he can unite the nation. He's called for that, and that we need to come together. I think that's a crucial part of all of this. Campaigns are always defined by events that take place. We've had two significant events just within the last 2 weeks. Of course, you had President Biden's performance on the debate stage that caused a lot of tremors and trembling inside of the Democratic Party. Now you've had an assassination attempt on the presumptive nominee for the Republicans in Donald Trump. How both parties will navigate all of this, I think, is going to be very telling and very instructive for all of us as voters and as citizens of this nation, that we should pause and reflect and step back just a little bit. And we need to remember the rhetoric that we will hear in the coming days. Always remember that anyone who plants thistles in the spring is not looking to harvest fruit in the fall. And anyone who is going to angry, divisive, violent political rhetoric is not planning on harvesting any kind of peace or forward movement united as a nation in the fall. We have about 114 days until the election. As we continue to see things play out, of course, there's local reaction to what took place yesterday, including statements coming out from Governor Spencer Cox, both of Utah's United States senators, among many others across the country, who have wished well the former president for a quick recovery.